the big news. The technology is back.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Brian Show.
Hello. The Brian Show, but our host is not here at the moment. I don't know where he is.
Where is Brian?
Brian.
Yes.
So Brian.
The excellent and fluffy host, Brian, is not around at the moment.
Sorry, Dave. I'm sure he'll make an appearance at some point.
He's probably in his kind of makeup cabin or something somewhere.
he's in his cabin, like writing his what they call riders. Give me this. Give me that.
Oh yeah, all the stipulation on the contract. Yeah. I demand this and I demand that.
I demand.
So Dave was first, although I did as soon as I loaded the thing on YouTube, I put first in the comments just to be childish. And
I can't see yours though.
Sorry,
I can't see your comment, Roger.
No, it kind of goes, doesn't it? After a while. So we got Amber, we got Dave again. We got Philip all the way from New York.
Nice.
Greetings.
So hi, Philip. I hope you're doing well.
It's Philip's lunchtime. It's his lunch break. Hope you're having what you having for lunch, Philip. Let us know.
Yeah, somebody's going to type. Is it vegan?
I'd hope so.
Right.
Isn't it nice when you log on and you see all those familiar names?
Yeah,
all those
that's
lovely
nice
people tuning in each week. It's really lovely.
Hi, Anne. Hi, Deb.
Hi, everyone.
We'll just give it a minute for people to see. They didn't trust the technology. Obviously, we might as well go late because.
Oh, Monday lunch with TARS. Rice and beans with. Does that say quack?
Quack, yeah. Well, ironic word for today, really. That isn't it?
Quack.
Yeah, quack.
Oh.
Maybe it means guac, like guacamole.
Yeah. Is it guacamole? Is it, Philip? What is it? Is it guac or quack? Could be some New York thing that I don't know about.
Guacamole.
Oh, it's guacamole. I thought it was a Q.
I'm eating homemade vegan flapjacks. That sounds good.
Oh, I love flapjack.
No dirt and beans
I do
from
too.
Tone.
No
What's
dirt and beans.
Is that? I was introduced to these things called messy chips recently. I've never had those before.
So.
Messy chips. What is that? Mashed potatoes?
No, it's just kind of what they say in Ireland is kind of chipper chips. So the big kind of.
Oh,
big ones. Like you'd say chippy, wouldn't you? Over there, they say chipper.
From the chippy. Oh yeah.
They say chipper in Ireland. Hey, Grumpy.
Oh, Grumpy's on time.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, well done, Grumps.
Well, technically about 4 minutes late, but never mind. We won't even mention that. So we have the Animal Justice Project back with us, and we're going to finish off what we started, and then we've got some more as well.
The Animal Justice Project, Ayrton.
Is that what I said?
Yes.
No, you know, we've got the Animal Justice Project back.
We need to issue a content warning, maybe.
Yeah.
The images are not that graphic, but bear in mind that they are not pleasant.
Yeah, they get worse towards the end. There's a little bit of blood on maybe the last slide actually, because it's a compilation, isn't it? Yeah, there's a bit of blood on that slide, but apart from that,
because you cut yourself shaving while you were putting it all together. That's what it was. Yeah, so we've got 3 campaigns to run through, really. So this one is the one called Scammed.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I'm afraid everyone's got to listen to me again this week.
Hi, Ronnie.
Because I can talk and talk.
Hi, Vegan Mooncat.
And hi, Mooncat.
Oh, hi, everybody.
Sorry, just saying that.
Sorry. Loads of people joining. It's brilliant. Yeah, so Scammed. So basically, a quick overview of Scammed is so it was a slaughterhouse investigation, and the whole idea is to show that the system that's in place, which I mean we all know this already, but the system that's in place to protect animals, especially at the time of slaughter. I know that sounds really ironic, but is completely failing. So the whole system is failing. And the whole point that we wanted to show was that it's not failing because everybody's doing it wrong. It's failing because this is the way that it's been designed. It's always going to be designed to fail the animals because, clearly slaughterhouses are not there to protect animals. They're there to protect profits and get the job done, unfortunately. Yeah, so if anybody has seen our investigation video, I purposely chosen images which aren't graphic because with it being a slaughterhouse investigation, it's just graphic throughout and there's blood and killing and all the awful things that go along with it. But I wanted to highlight this scene, for example. So something that we wanted to show was that on top of the standard killing and abuse and how horrific it is for the animals on a standard day to day, they then have to face these, these added abuses from these workers. So this one example, which is highlighted in our investigation video because it was so terrible, was these are two large bulls, and they were basically two petrified. And this is like a chute that they're run down. Basically, they're supposed to, where the bull's head is, he's supposed to be going forward so they can both fit in, and that tiny little gate that's against the wall will close behind them. And then basically that's where they should get stunned, and then they'll get hung up and basically taken around the other side. But this ordeal lasted about 40 minutes, as in 40 minutes, trying to get these bulls down this chute. And it was this one worker mostly doing all of the abuse. And basically he's got he's got a metal pole that's pointed at the end, which they shouldn't be using anyway. And he's just jabbing them, shouting at them, hitting them over and over again. Finally, the manager does intervene, but then he brings in an electrified prodder, which is even worse for the bulls. They run them back out and they try to get them in again. And yeah, it's truly a horrific scene. But yeah, it's just to show that, on top of everything else, they then have to face, pointed sticks that they shouldn't be using, electrified prods that they shouldn't be using when an animal has nowhere to go or is terrified and not cooperating. And then finally, these two bulls weren't even stunned and killed. They were actually shot dead with a huge gun, with a rifle. I think it was a rifle. Simply because they were too petrified. So I wanted to highlight this scene for anybody. Well, obviously people don't agree with, people in the comments aren't going to agree, but the public, for example, might say that because this is a small local family slaughterhouse, it's much better than the industrial sized ones. And these small slaughterhouses as well are actually being promoted by the government currently. They've created many organisations to actually promote and increase the number of small slaughterhouses around the UK. And they're saying that it's going to be better for welfare because animals have to travel less distance because there'll be more slaughterhouses to use. And that's one of their biggest parts. But actually, if these are the kind of slaughterhouses that the animals are going to, they're facing the worst time that you could imagine. Inside a place where they're already going to be killed. They've probably had a terrible life, on farms being mutilated and abused and all sorts. But yeah, so for anybody who believes, even if there is, the kindest farm out there that's organic and free range and all of these other buzzwords, they're still ending up at these horrific slaughterhouses. So yeah, it's a very poignant scene and it's very horrific. So if you are going to watch the video, please take a lot of caution with it because it's very, very horrible. If you want to go to the second photo.
Well, just on a couple of things you've said already, Ayrton, if I might. The idea of not cooperating is really interesting because that was one of the main themes. There was a book out by Gail Aisnitz. It's an ethnography. I think she might have been a sociologist, not quite sure now. And she interviewed a lot of people who work in slaughterhouses, and that's one of the things that they said all the time, that they kind of punish them more if they didn't cooperate, and they're expected to cooperate in their own
100%.
deaths, right? And they're seen as troublemakers if they don't quietly go to their deaths, right? And so it's just an incredibly kind of weird situation. And when you say that the cameras are to protect the other animals at the time of slaughter, as you say, a deeply ironic thing to say in the first place, right? But when you were kind of researching the scammed campaign, you must have looked at the rationale for putting the cameras in the first place.
Yes,
It was a welfare thing. It was to stop this kind of thing that's on the screen, right?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, Animal Justice Project as a whole, we're an abolitionist group. So we're not here to improve welfare. We're not here to implement, you know, CCTV being mandatory across, you know, in other countries or anything like that. But yeah, just to point out, this is all in clear view. So everything caught on our cameras is caught on the slaughterhouse's own CCTV. So this is only coming to light because we've brought it into the public domain. This was happening, this was being recorded. The FSA has access to this. The official veterinarian on site, which is a government vet, has access to this. The manager is in, you know, the manager is seeing this happening. The workers are doing it every day. So basically, the reason why we did this investigation was because if you've ever heard of some legislation called WATOK, so WATOK, so it's the welfare of animals at the time of killing. So basically, that's the UK slaughter legislation. It's mostly based off like European laws. But yeah, so this law called WATOK, there was a big 5-year review, so a 5-year post-implementation review at the beginning of this year. So that took place in January, and pretty much the review found that there was no issues, largely. I mean, they pulled up a couple of things, but pretty much they showed that there was not really any issues with slaughterhouses and, you know, WATOK as a legislation itself, and there was pretty much no actions to be taken afterwards as well. So even the BVA, so the British Veterinary Association, even they pointed out the complete lack of inaction on the back of this massive review that was supposed to be groundbreaking. So what we decided to do, we decided to go into a slaughterhouse and find out exactly what it's like ourselves, because clearly the government are not telling people, you know, because the slaughterhouses are going to be far worse than what they're saying. And actually, if you look at the FSA's audit data, they find very little non-compliances when they go to any slaughterhouse. And if they do, it's always minor. There's very few major non-compliances. And we filmed a lot of them over a period of like 7 or 8 days. So that just goes to show, like, you can basically choose any slaughterhouse anytime and you'll find these non-compliances. But the interesting thing...
Didn't you mention that they'd scored someone 6 out of 7, and then when they found out that you'd filmed in there and you were about to expose, that they changed their scoring? Is that right? Is that the FSA as well?
Yes. Yeah, kind of. So it was 6 out of 7 of the last audits. Before we released our investigation, 6 out of 7 of the last audits. So they're roughly every 12 to 15 months, depending on what they get from the audit. And this slaughterhouse, 6 out of 7 times, was called generally satisfactory. So that's basically like middle of the playing field. Well, it's kind of the lower end, actually, because then you get good and then you get, I think, very good and very weird marking system. But yeah, so basically this slaughterhouse was found to be fine, basically, for multiple years in a row. And as soon as we did our investigation, we always report our findings officially to the FSA or Trading Standards or whoever is the relevant body for that investigation. And because they found out that we did this investigation and how horrific our findings were because we told them, they basically went in, seized the CCTV, saw it all for themselves, and then they quickly went in, did a really fast audit before it made the national media, and basically scored them to the lowest category that you can possibly have. So they dropped down multiple categories to, I think it's urgent improvements needed. So it's like the worst category you can be in. Just in time for us to release it to the media, just so the FSA doesn't look as bad as they truly are. But
how convenient.
Yeah, that goes to show, doesn't it? And then because they were so bad that they've been audited, I think once a month since then. And they've now gone back up to this, generally satisfactory grade. So they're not even going to be audited again now for another year. So they've pretty much gone away with everything.
And do they get warned? Do they know when they're going to be audited? Do they know when they're going to be audited? Do they get warning, as in they know the day, the time, or is it just?
Yeah, the FSA do not do unannounced audits. So this slaughterhouse will have known that the FSA were coming to every single audit, actually. And even with it, so yeah, going back to the CCTV, actually, so it's mandatory for English and now Scottish slaughterhouses to have CCTV in place. Only if you're accepting animals from outside of your company. So basically, if you're farming the animals on site, killing them, and you can even sell them on the same site, you don't have to have CCTV. So a couple of years ago, we did an investigation at a place called Pastures Poultry, which is exactly that scenario. They breed all their own birds, kill on site, and they have a farm shop. They don't legally have to have CCTV. So although people think it's mandatory in the UK, it's not currently, because these smaller slaughterhouses can get away with it because they produce their own animals. So that's just yet another loophole in the system. But yeah, this one does because they take in from farmers, although it is, a small slaughterhouse.
Do you feel that the existence of CCTVs is counterproductive in the sense that the public feels reassured that there are laws in place and someone is monitoring?
Yeah, I think this is one of the points that we're trying to show is that, this is designed to fail the animals, the system is, and that includes CCTV. So although this, it was quite groundbreaking that CCTV is going to be implemented in English slaughterhouses, but the CCTV is accessible to the manager and accessible to the approved veterinarian. So the approved vet is a government vet through the FSA who has to go to the slaughterhouse regularly and basically do daily inspections. And we've got a lot of footage of the vet kind of watching abuses take place as well, and they're basically not doing anything. But what's interesting is that the daily reported data by those vets is not accessible in the public domain, even though it's a government body, so it should be. The audit data is public, but again, the audits are unannounced. And then the interesting thing about CCTV is that even when they do one audit a year, they don't even have to seize the CCTV, and they don't routinely or randomly seize any CCTV from any slaughterhouse. So it's great that these places are putting up cameras, but nobody's watching it. And actually, they have to record it and keep it for 3 months, and then after that, it's deleted forever. So, yeah, it's a great welfare win, I guess, and it's going to make the consumer feel a lot better because these workers are being spied on, and they've got to treat animals respectfully. But our investigation clearly shows that they don't take any notice of the cameras, not even the manager. We filmed the actual manager, who runs the slaughterhouse, doing so much rule breaking, breaches of regulations and breaking the law as well. So yeah, it's not working basically.
Well, from an animal rights point of view, it's set up to fail whatever, really. But I think building on what Wendy said, that if people hear about cameras inside slaughterhouses, they're going to assume somebody's watching the screens, and so that's going to reassure them. So, this is all about reassurance. It makes you wonder why anybody campaigned for it in the first place. It seems to me, but that's another matter. Do you want me to move on to the next one? There's a bit of a
sorry, there are
on the next one, folks. And also, Ayrton, you said something really interesting last time, which is that you purposely put your cameras next to their cameras on purpose, right? Do you want to explain that? That's really interesting.
Yeah, so obviously, this footage is taken by installed cameras, as you can see from the angles, and where possible, we do put cameras in the same angles as their CCTV, just as another backing for ourselves. Because then the workers can't say, the managers or the FSA then can't come in and say, oh, sorry, it's not caught by the CCTV within the slaughterhouse, so how are we supposed to know what's happening? So basically everything we show is visible to their own CCTV, and that's the reason that we do it. But yeah, you can see here, I wanted to, so basically this is the stun room. This is where the animals get stunned, hung up, and then as you can see in the next room, it's very bloody. So I've not showed any of those images. But yeah, basically I wanted to show this because that's illegal. You cannot restrain an animal, a sheep, by their horns. And actually the scene was so disturbing to watch because they're fully goading these sheep and yeah, just saying horrible stuff to the sheep, knowing they're about to kill them. And the other interesting thing is that the equipment on 4 out of 8 of the days that we filmed in the slaughterhouse, the equipment was failing, as in the electrified stun equipment. So animals were being like pre-stunned. They were being stunned for too short a length because the equipment failed and because the workers weren't doing it for long enough. I'm saying this from a legal perspective, obviously not from what we think. And then, yeah, so basically this failed, and then it was also, it was just the electrified tongs that were failing, which they used these on the sheep, the pigs, and the piglets as well, because we filmed like tiny piglets being killed who were probably like 4 weeks old just from the mom. So it just goes to show that, you know, the workers really don't care about the animals. And as we said earlier, the ones that resist really do get an even worse deal, especially the sheep, because the sheep, they are so petrified in the footage. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. I'm not going to go on and on about that because it's very disturbing. But
in a way, I think, because we talk about, oh sorry, that's my pencil. We talk about kind of workers and how, we call them every name under the sun, and they're evil and they're monsters and things like this. But in a way, if we think about what they're expected to do within the system, how can there be anything else? Because the whole system is geared under capitalism to make profit. That's the main thing. So it's all geared around, let's make as much profit as we can. So for these people, they're basically, this is their job. They have to get it done as quickly as they can. They have to desensitize to the violence and the violations, because how else can they deal with that every day? It's just their job. And also that they see so many other animals one after the other, that to them, that it kind of diminishes the individuality of those other animals, doesn't it? So they're kind of so desensitized to it. And then also, I suppose, if they're about to kill someone, they have to, in a way, somehow regulate that emotionally. So I suppose they kind of go from a spectrum of like indifferent detachment to contempt and hatred of these people that they're killing. Because in a way, how can you as a human get yourself to kill over and over again without somehow emotionally regulating yourself to do that? So I can't even imagine what goes on in their minds. Or maybe they just have to kind of completely switch off and do it. So it's just the whole system is just horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, you can tell that they're completely desensitized to it. They clearly don't see these animals as like living, sentient beings. They see them as, just the next thing coming in, like literally just an item off a shelf or something. Because they really, they just honestly don't care. And they see, I think something I picked up from the footage is that the animals that resist, they just see them as a massive burden, and it just annoys them. Yeah. And actually, what was interesting was a lot of these workers showed like signs of aggression and all sorts, even when they weren't around the animals. Like one of the workers was practicing like boxing moves, which was the most bizarre situation between killing animals. And it's like his head is completely not even in the job right there. He's thinking about sport or training or whatever, and he's literally just then killing, tiny piglets or 9-day-old calves. It's very, very, very strange. If you want to go to the next photo, so this is the last one for scanned. Yeah, so the person at the bottom. So again, this is the same. It's not the same bulls as before, but it's a similar situation where a lot of the larger cows and bulls were petrified because obviously they're going into the unknown and they're being put in, down a chute that funnels, so it's getting narrower and narrower. And these are gigantic animals. And again, these three were just so petrified they did not want to move forward. And they were trying to jab them with pointed sticks, which they shouldn't be doing. And you can see that the worker in the blue, this is the manager that I keep mentioning. He's doing the law breaking as well. So he's actually got there. That's the electrified product. So that's given an electric shock to that cow. And you can see the cow is stuck in the middle of two other cows. She cannot move anywhere. So they shouldn't be using that device on an animal that cannot move forward. Legally, I don't agree with it, obviously, but legally they should be doing that to the one at the front, but they didn't do that at all. They were doing it to the one in the middle and the ones at the back to try and push them forward. And going back to the veterinarian, the person in the high vis is the vet. So she's watching this happen. And although her face is blurred, we basically tried to leave the bottom half of the face unblurred because it's probably hard to see on here, but she's smiling and laughing.
Yeah.
During this scene, she's smiling and she's laughing, and this happened multiple times. And these animals are petrified, and she trained to be a vet, and she's watching this happen. And she basically doesn't step in once during our footage for the welfare of the animals.
And I guess vets have not the same excuses workers may have. I mean, workers that are refugees, or they come from really poor background, or for several reasons they don't have a choice. And I think that this is still a small percentage. That's my personal opinion. Other people that work in slaughterhouse, and especially vets, they do not fall in this category. So in my mind, they are just sadists. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I think something that's interesting about this vet in particular, I mean, we don't have all the information on the person, but we're pretty certain this is, because this person is very young, so they're clearly a new graduate, and we think that they've came from, so something I mentioned last week was the FSA struggled to get British vets to take these appointed veterinary roles inside slaughterhouses, because British vets don't want to do this because it's a horrific job. Basically, a lot of their appointed vets are from abroad, and this vet is from abroad. So it's probably her first job in a veterinary role, and this is the job that she's facing. So that's probably why she's staying in the role, because she probably doesn't have much other option, and she has to maybe get a few years doing this before she can finally get a better job elsewhere. Not justifying her staying in a slaughterhouse watching this, but I think that's probably the situation that's happening.
Also, people get social. I mean, Roger, you'll be able to speak to this much more, but people get socialized into whatever environment they find themselves in, don't they? So if you're in a job, whatever job that might be, whether that's in an office or a school or a hospital or wherever, you get socialized to the environment, in that you start to fit in with that culture. And I wonder if there's an element of that as well with people in these environments, that it's like you fit in or you get out. And so if you want to keep your job, you fit in.
I think so. I've read a couple of articles before as well, which is kind of related to that, in the sense that because of the environment amongst the workers inside slaughterhouses is very male dominated in these smaller slaughterhouses, and especially if the young vets are coming in, and especially if they're female, they might feel daunted by the culture inside the slaughterhouse. It's a very violent culture because of what they're doing. As I said, the workers showed signs of aggression towards the animals. So maybe a young female vet does not want to stand up to these older male workers. I mean, I'm not just going to bring it back to sex, but it is a very relevant point.
Incredibly powerful point, isn't it? I mean, the gendered kind of analysis here is real. Like you say, she was from abroad. She's very young. looks like she's new on the job. Her coat is brand new, and then that's also the manager, who's also the man in charge and all that kind of stuff. Her job is to kind of facilitate the smooth running of a slaughterhouse, and then is she expected to kind of break all those kind of gender rules by going, oi, I'm in charge here, really, not you, and all that kind of stuff. It would be very, very difficult to do that job in terms of looking after animal welfare, which is presumably what she thinks she's there for.
I mean,
but
she's there to
it's a conflict situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is majorly. I think something that's interesting as well is that these vets probably stick it out because they know that they're easily replaced. I mean, I know I just had the FSA have a struggle getting these people in, but like they will probably easily. Basically, I think the slaughterhouses can probably request new vets if they're not settling in, or they can complain about the vets and just get them sent elsewhere. It's something interesting that's, Dr. Alice Brough, the ex-pig vet.
I was just about to mention Alice as well. Yeah.
About the Red Tractor Assurance Scheme is that basically if the farmer doesn't like them or agree with what they're saying about their farm, they'll simply sack them and get a new one. So they get their accreditation. And I mean, we don't have any proof, but it's likely that that's a similar situation with the OV vets, the official veterinarians. I mean, that's what I'd say.
I don't know how things go ahead, Gord.
No, sorry, you go ahead, Nella.
I just want to say I don't know how things work in every country, but having talked to a lot of vets here, they say that while they are still in school, they have to decide if they are going to specialize on the so-called productive animals or the animal companions. And they all said that those who don't want to kill others, and we're not talking about vegans, we're not about people that eat other animals, those that are horrified by the slaughter, they just don't specialize in this area. And the reason I feel so I have this very negative idea about vets is because no matter where they are, they have a very high education, a very expensive one. And I just cannot feel that they don't have a choice. I mean, even if the question is money, I mean, they are someone with a medical degree.
Yeah.
They can always choose to do something else.
Yeah, I think this is why the FSA targets a lot of like young Eastern European new graduates, is because they can probably they can maybe offer them a higher wage than what they'd get in their country. It's an opportunity to move abroad if they want to as well. They're basically
there could be a language barrier problem, couldn't there, as well, Ayrton? I mean, obviously we're speculating, but I mean, there could be a language barrier situation. Dave said she could report the incident afterwards. That would then put her into the category of troublemaker, like the other animals who won't go to their death.
So something interesting to point out is that we're showing the failure of the vet to take any direct action right there. We're showing that she's not stepping in and stopping him doing that. We're not saying that she isn't reporting afterwards, because she may well be. We don't have access to her records because, as I mentioned earlier, the records that she will be submitting every day are not publicly accessible, despite it going to the FSA, which is a public government body. They publish their audits, but the daily work from these vets is probably due to lack of time and money and resources, to be honest. But they don't publish their data, so she may well have reported them. But again, if it comes back, if they then get done by the FSA or contacted, there's only one person it can be. So it's unlikely that they're reporting much, especially if the slaughterhouse over the last 7 years has been generally satisfactory. Unless it's something major, they're not going to step in.
And also, at the end of the day, these vets, they're not in a practice which are trying to save the lives of other animals. They're in a situation where those other animals are about to die. So I wonder if there's an element of redundancy about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, well, doesn't matter that much because actually they're going to be killed anytime soon anyway. Do you know what I mean? I wonder if that's part of the mindset in that situation as well.
I mean, there was major issues with what the vet seemingly wasn't doing as well, and especially because so when animals arrive, they're supposed to be greeted by an animal welfare officer, which is likely to be the manager. But we filmed calves. I think I mentioned it last week actually, because it was in the same slaughterhouse as the calf slaughter. We filmed calves being left in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, freezing cold conditions. They weren't greeted by an animal welfare officer at all. We've got lame pigs turning up with masses on their shoulders where they can barely walk, and they're being literally pushed into the stun room because they can't walk. They should never be transported. That's completely illegal. We've got lame dairy cows arriving. They should never have been transported. They legally probably should have been shot on the farm. And then we even had one Jersey dairy cow that arrived that had metal shackles on her back legs, keeping her legs together, because she would have been so sick. Because basically the reason they do that is to stop them doing the splits at the back.
Just the splits, yeah.
And that's because they're just so ill. None of these animals should have been transported. And the interesting thing about the official vet is that during our investigation, we never once seen her in the stun room or in the kill room. We only ever saw her out the front in the layerage area like this. So she's not even overseeing the whole process. She certainly wasn't in the area, where they're putting their pigs in the, the boiling water tanks and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, overall, it's obviously horrible to talk about, but with the awful audits by the FSA, with the CCTV just basically being ineffective, with the vets not stepping up and actually doing their jobs, and with the workers and the managers doing extra purposeful abuse, hopefully all of that in one can show that the system is built to fail.
So did this ever happen? I mean, there's a question here about whether any of them ever get prosecuted. Presumably, whatever that means.
It's very, 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 very hard. I'll mention that in a second because we're going to talk about Gressingham Duck in a minute. But I mean, we filmed illegal things happening on farms, inside slaughterhouses, yet to have a prosecution take place, even though the authorities have everything they need to prosecute and could easily prosecute. And there's clear breaking of the law, and they just don't do it, pretty much.
I suppose they've got no incentive to do it, have they? For them, there's no motivation or incentive to prosecute anyone in these industries.
No, because it will be the FSA working with the CPS, so Food Standards Agency working with the Crown Prosecution Service to do these prosecutions inside slaughterhouses. And if the FSA pursue that, it's just going to show that they've not done their job this whole time. That vet is hired through them. The CCTV is there through them. They're supposed to be upholding the laws that aren't being upheld. So basically, if they prosecute, it shows that they've not done their own job. So that's probably why you don't see many prosecutions from farms or slaughterhouses. One of the most major ones was a couple of years ago, and that was simply because it was an illegal slaughterhouse. Whereas all of these are approved slaughterhouses, and they're approved by the FSA. So the whole system is run by the FSA because they're part of the government, and we're just showing that it's
like wheels within wheels, isn't it?
Yeah, it's designed to fail the animals. It's never ever going to protect animals, whether there's a CCTV camera there, whether there's a vet there, or anything.
It's like students setting their own exams and then marking their own exams, isn't it? It's basically
Yeah, basically.
But the weird thing, going back to the prosecution though, from an animal rights point of view, if there's the odd prosecution, that could be worse, in the sense that it's always characterized as one bad apple, and then the public get the impression that first of all, the rights violations that occur routinely are very kind of few and far between. So that's one mistake that they make. And if they do occur at all, they will be then prosecuted. And then they can then say, we've now got this one bad apple out. We've sharpen up our welfare practices, it'll never happen again, and all the rest of it. I mean, from our point of view, you tend to think, how many one bad apples can there be? But from the public point of view, they kind of buy. I mean, it's in their interest to kind of buy along with that, isn't it? So a prosecution doesn't help us from an animal rights point of view either.
No,
so,
it doesn't. I think we see that. So every investigation we've done, either the farm or the slaughterhouse is going to fall under, the FSA, or it's going to be under some form of assurance scheme like RSPCA Assured or Red Tractor. And every single time we release an investigation, they put out pretty much identical statements to say, we've gone in, took action, this shouldn't have happened, we retrained staff, blah, 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 and basically it's back to normal.
There's a point about the RSPCA here from Dave, but I mean, the RSPCA being
situation,
traditional welfare, what they're going to do,
Yeah, the RSPCA will not deal with this. If this was reported to them, they'd probably refer it to the local council, so it'll be trading standards, or it's more than likely going to go to the Food Standards Agency,
who regulate it.
Yeah, the RSPCA
and then pat themselves on the back.
Yeah, they pass it on to the relevant body, unfortunately. But yes, I think it's important what you just said as well, actually, about how it doesn't help animal rights, and pretty much everything I've said about this investigation so far is probably quite welfare-y, but we're not in there to show that these laws are not protecting animals. We're not showing that the law isn't being upheld. We want to show that the laws isn't protecting animals, and that CCTV isn't, the government isn't, the vets aren't, etc. So we're trying to show that the entire system will never ever protect the animals. So basically, we need to scrap the system, and obviously, get rid of slaughterhouses and farms. That's the overall message. But yeah, I think if we can show the whole system doesn't work, it encompasses every kind of farm and every kind of slaughterhouse, whether it's the local farm, family farm, organic, free range, all of these different words. So hopefully it can be positive to the public in that sense.
Do you have to frame it this way every time you have a press release, or you make public an investigation, so that the public won't think that what you've been asking for is better laws?
Yeah, we have to word things very carefully. So obviously, because we're abolitionist, our demands and asks are always abolitionist as well. So with all of our work that we put out, and like the statements to the press as well, like we're not going to say we want to improve any law to improve any welfare. We will always say, like, this shows that the system isn't helping and it will never work and it completely fails, and we need to scrap the system. We don't need to improve the system, we need to get rid of it. And it needs to be replaced by a plant-based food system. That's basically our key messaging for most things.
Do you find that you have to kind of almost like baby the journalists through with your message, in the sense that you have to kind of go, right, what we're not saying is this, don't get the wrong impression type thing? Because I did that. I did meet the victims thing in Ireland, and because they're used to people talking about cruelty and abuse and all the rest of it, they thought that was it, what it was all about. And so it's very difficult then to actually get the journalist to understand your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we work with some like really great journalists, so we probably don't have as much of an issue, but we're always clear with our messaging that we're here for veganism and not for a welfare reform with any work that we do. I mean, if you see the news articles relating to this, it's talking about the piglets being killed, piglets being drowned alive in the scalding tanks, and all of these different things which shouldn't be happening and are welfare based. But obviously that's what the media likes to run with, is kind of welfare based stories. But our messaging is always, get rid of the system, and that it shouldn't be there in the first place. And they do put those quotes in there, so very lucky.
Do you get any feedback from that, Ayrton, from those kind of more kind of radical messaging
from the journalists,
from the journalists, or from the public, or from anyone really?
Not really from the journalists, because I mean, they'll get the statement from the company, they'll get statements from us. We work with the journalists for quite a long time to get the story out there. Yeah, I mean, from the public, it's usually quite positive. I mean, I think most of the public probably will still see any investigation as a bad apple, as Roger's already said. But I think that's why it's important that we continue doing these investigations. You know, the more and more that are out there, the more that are in the media, you know, through Animal Justice Project and any other groups that are pushing the abolitionist messaging, the more we can push out there, hopefully people will begin to realise that this is far more common than they imagine. So, yeah, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, shall we move on, because we're 45 minutes in already.
We've covered a quarter of what I was going to talk about. I'll talk through chickens very fast though. Yeah. Okay. So the next campaign I wanted to talk about. So we've just spoke about Scammed. So that's on the animaljusticeproject.com website. But then we have because we have multiple websites, we've got one called thefoultruth.org, which encompasses all of our chicken and duck investigations currently. So we launched that campaign just over 2 years ago, in July of 2019, with our first ever farmed animal investigation. So it was these chickens here. So we wanted to investigate RSPCA assured chicken farms. So basically, RSPCA assured, I'm sure you've probably heard about it before, but they do pretty much have some of the highest standards for any assurance scheme in the UK. They're not good standards, clearly, but they are higher, you know, compared to Red Tractor. Most farms in the UK are Red Tractor anyway, so it's kind of a default. Doesn't really mean anything anymore. But yeah, so RSPCA assured, these are classed as free-range meat birds. So these are going to be far more expensive than the regular chicken that you'll see in the supermarket. But yeah, so basically we investigated these because we wanted to show that if we can show that the highest welfare label is just as bad as the intensively reared birds, so what people would call factory farmed birds, then they have no excuse but to stop eating chicken and go vegan completely. Again, this was, you know, against welfare assurance labels, because we don't want to be pushing for any form of welfare reform. So yeah, something that's interesting about this is that there's some, I can't remember if I mentioned it last week or not, but there's the Better Chicken Commitment, which a lot of people are talking about at the minute. And the Better Chicken Commitment is basically some of the big asks within the commitment. You can Google it, by the way. If you just literally Google Better Chicken Commitment, you can see the guidelines. If you look at the older version that's called the European Chicken Commitment, it's a lot easier to read. But yeah, so they're pushing for basically improved welfare, a different breed of chicken, so they're classed as slower growing chickens, so they're not supposed to get as many health issues. They live for longer, I think about 2 weeks longer, so barely anything. And they're supposed to have like enrichment, perches, outdoor space, all of these great things. And basically we found the opposite, obviously, because they don't stick to the rules, and the rules are terrible for the chickens anyway. They're not really having that much of a better life. So if you want to, yeah, so basically this is the inside of the sheds that you can see. The red things are like drinkers and feeders. This is when the chicks first went in on this photo. So this worker actually, she was chucking these tiny day-old chicks out of plastic crates, and they were dropping about 4 foot to hit the ground. And she was just throwing more and more crates into the same place. Not in this photo, but in a different one. And they were just piling up on the floor. And then what we recorded, because the workers note how many dead chickens they get, or chicks they get every day, we found out that almost 500 chicks died within 1 week of entering this one shed, because they were thrown from crates. The day after, workers were walking through and they didn't even look at the chicks, they were stepping on them, which would have killed them. And then what she's actually doing in this photo, if a chick shows any sign of like illness or, you know, disability or anything, she's snapping the neck of a chick on that metal line right there. And that's how they humanely kill chicks and chickens. They basically snap their necks. Yeah, so if you want to go to the next photo, so I'll zoom through chickens, but
funny
the other
people's
big...
interpretation of humane, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. So the other big thing about the Better Chicken Commitment is that they're supposed to have enrichment, and they have like wooden perches put in. So the wooden perch, they're supposed to be given about 2 meters per 1,000 birds. So how you fit 1,000 chickens into 2 meters, I'm not really sure. And the other thing is they're supposed to have other added enrichment, so such as plastic bottles. So this was the enrichment that these thousands and thousands of chicks were given. It's literally an old Coke bottle that still has Coke in the bottom of it that a worker is tied to the metal pole. And these are literally the simple things that get them to the highest welfare standards in the country.
Yeah.
You know, obviously these chickens are a different breed of broiler chicken compared to the intensively reared birds. So they do grow a bit slower, but I've not included any photos because they are quite distressing. But, you know, we found the exact same issues with these birds. They had leg issues. They had hock burns. They had like burnt chests where they were stuck on ammonia. They were stuck on their backs because they were so big. There was dead birds everywhere. But yeah, so it's a very eye-opening investigation. As I said, it was the first one that we ever did, and I'm very pleased that we managed to show that the best welfare for chickens in the country is just as bad as any intensively reared birds. And bearing in mind, these free-range birds only account for 5% of the entire market. 95% are intensively reared.
This bottle, Ayrton, is that supposed to be a toy?
Yeah, that's the enrichment. So it's to keep them entertained.
And you can imagine how that would sound, wouldn't you? Oh, we have the highest welfare standards. Our chicks have enrichment, you know, in their free range environment. It would sound like, oh, that sounds lovely. And actually, you look at the reality of it. And actually, there's a really interesting conversation going on. I don't know if you don't mind, Ayrton, if we can just address it, because it's all about, you're talking about welfare here, and I think it's Race Lever who's saying about they're an abolitionist, but I don't know if I can go back and just find that, so I don't want to put words in their mouth. Oh, there we are. But all or nothing won't help the animals already in line before the abolishment comes. And then there's been a little bit of a discussion around abolition versus welfare, etc. And I think someone who would speak very strongly to this is Gary Francione, especially in Rain Without Thunder, talking about how actually welfare reforms don't help other animals at all. In fact, they harm them because they basically perpetuate the speciesist paradigm, and they do help people to feel reassured, don't they, about the systems that breed, use and kill other animals. And basically, I think welfare reforms are actually the friends of the industry, aren't they? Because, well, firstly, they help to hide the violence and the violations under a humane veneer. Like we keep hearing that word humane. And that's what the public will see, so that it helps industry to sell their so-called products, because the market is a reassured market. But also the reforms often make the business of using and killing other animals more efficient and therefore more profitable. So actually welfare reforms are actually very much the friends of the industry. And so I think as animal rights advocates, we are in a difficult situation because we're trying to navigate a well-established and deeply embedded systems, because we want to show, you do want to show these non-vegans that the humane veneer is not reality. So we do want to shock them and all this kind of thing. But, this standard practice, it gets muddied, doesn't it? But I think it's that sense of, welfare reforms, are they helpful? And I think more often than not, they're just reinforcing the paradigm. And so I guess we have to be clear about the abolitionist message. And as Roger always says, actually, it's about who does what. It's like, if people are into welfare, like the RSPCA and all these people, let them go ahead with welfare. But if you're an animal rights activist, if you stay in the paradigm of treatment and welfare and cruelty, you're just reinforcing, you're staying within the system, you're just going round in a circle. You're not chipping away at that system. You're just going to go round and round and round, as we've seen with the CCTV. That was advocated by the movement. Let's have CCTV. And now we've got others in the movement going, actually, no, this doesn't work. We've gone round in a whole circle. And we're just going to keep doing that like we're on a treadmill. Sorry, I just had a little rant there. But
Wendy's rant of the day.
You make a really good point though. Like I think it's obvious if we see because obviously farrowing crates in this country, as in like the crates they're kept in before they give birth for pigs, they're banned in the UK. And clearly a pig that is able to free walk around is going to have a slightly better life than a pig that's stuck in a crate. Like, I see that, and that is a welfare improvement. But why did they do that improvement? It was never for the pigs. A welfare improvement has never come into power for animals. No. It's because of the consumers and wanting to make the public feel better. And it's like, I understand that literally those animals that are living in those conditions, it may improve. And like, I mean, for this photo, like, is that chick's life any better because there's a hanging Coke bottle? Probably not. But actually, it means that that chicken's dead body can have a stamp on it for the RSPCA Assured logo, and it can be sold for twice the amount of money than an intensively reared bird. Just to kind of counter that, but like I do see where people are coming from when they say animals are going to have a better life if welfare improves. I mean, that's a given, but we can't stick with the mindset that it's okay to exploit an animal in any way, shape, or form. If we don't ask for 100% abolition to these industries, then they're never going to get us there. When they're never going to meet us there, are they? Like if we ask for 100%,
we're going to get, well, if we ask for animal rights, we'll get animal welfare anyway, so we don't have to ask for animal welfare. I mean,
exactly. And the industry is naturally going that way.
Yeah, it's a lot to do with animal welfare science. Because the story goes that in Britain, at least, a bit after the States, but the real intensification of farming in Britain was after the Second World War. And then it was a question of just cramming other animals into any kind of production system that you can. The more the merrier, because there was this huge kind of surge for demand, whereas the eating of chickens used to be a kind of thing for the elite and maybe on a Sunday, and then it became an everyday type thing. So there's a huge surge in demand, but then they found that they were compromising the welfare of their own systems by putting too many together and cramming them in. And so then you had a process of them kind of dialing back a little bit. And that's why they started then introduce what we would call welfare measures, because their mortality rates were just too high and this kind of stuff. They kind of had to. So that there is that issue. Then finally, before we move on from this race lever, I don't understand this phrase "all or nothing" in this conversation. Never have. It's the kind of thing that Melanie Joy and Tobias Leonhardt says. I don't know any animal advocate who said to the user industry, "Give us it all, or we don't want anything." I mean, who's ever said that in the first place?
Yeah, I think that the way I try to explain it to people, like if I'm doing outreach or anything like that, if like a member of the public comes up and says veganism's extreme and we shouldn't be asking for that, I always try to tell them that if I'm on the streets asking for you to improve 20%, you're only going to improve 10%, because people are never going to meet you all of the way. Whereas if I'm on the street asking you to change 100% of the way, you may improve by 50%. And improving by 50% is far better than improving by 10%. And then eventually, the next conversation, you can then improve again and get even further and further. And eventually, hopefully, they'll turn vegan and these industries will end. But yeah, if we're asking for welfare and the public agree, then we're only going to get welfare. Whereas if we ask for abolition, we'll end up with welfare, but we can keep pushing and eventually we'll get there. This is how things get banned.
And also, Rachel's comment there, that's just the one I just had in my mind, actually. Maybe the abolition model hasn't stopped it yet. I don't think the abolitionist model has actually been given a good go, because the movement is stuck in welfarism. So I don't think we've actually seen a good go at this, although we can try and we do give it a good
and social
go on this.
Historically take hundreds of years. Like, we're not about to change the world in the next 10 years, as optimistic as I want to be. But we're not about to see the end of animal agriculture in the next 10 years. Do you know what I mean? We'll probably see a lot of welfare reforms, but eventually it will get there. But it's going to take
and then you've got the social psychology of the situation. It's often been thought within the movement that a small ask, the foot in the door type thing, is the best. And yet you got people like Casey Taft, who's also a psychologist, saying that there's a lot of research saying that the big ask is better than the small ask, because the big ask gets people to think morally about the situation. And as you said, Ayrton, they might move along that spectrum, but you don't have to tell them where to go. They'll do that themselves. You know, it's a little bit like, well, you know, they might ask for advice along the way, but the point is you don't have to say to them, you know, go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. You can just tell them where the destination is, and then they'll figure out the steps, or they'll ask you. You don't need to specify it.
Exactly. And everybody in the UK, every consumer will agree with you that they want animal welfare improvements, or they want the animals to have a good life and all of this. We obviously know it doesn't happen. But if we then question their beliefs with the complete opposite, so if we're going in with veganism against their speciesism, then I should say it's going to educate them far more than us talking about any form of welfare reform.
And also, I mean, if you never state what you want and what's the truth actually, because we're talking about oppression here, they may never think of it by themselves, because people are so used to thinking about welfare, and these industries do their job so well, and have like millions of people think that cows are in green pastures and chickens are bred under the sun and whatever. So people have these images in their mind, and they're completely false. But even in the cases where these images are true, like in villages, for example, if you use the welfare argument, then you have nothing. Because there actually are some individuals that are raised in a green pasture and then they're slaughtered. And what does this mean, that this should have been slaughtered? The most useful thing I find in my outreach, because usually we saw footage from investigations, and it's graphic, and people's first reaction is that this should not be happening. And then we used to show them something from a backyard slaughter, an individual who had a happy life. And at that point, they realized that cannot be a fair way to kill anyone. So I feel that it is a point we should always make.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
And just getting the words animal rights out there and the word vegan out there as much as we possibly can. You know, so people, I mean, that comment that just came up about understanding what animal rights actually means, like the general public don't even know what that means. So we must talk about that, and that must be our ask every single time. And they'll probably meet us halfway and then, you know, talk about welfare, but then they might then see somebody else on the street or see another article or see another video, and they'll keep improving towards animal rights, hopefully. Right, do you want me to skim through the duck section? Sorry, yeah. You need to me along, I think.
It's really nice, because the issues that it brings up are really, it's the interesting, juicy bits that we want to talk about, isn't it? So it's good.
The juicy bits.
The juicy bits.
What are you suggesting we do a part 3, or are we suggesting we zip through this? Or
it's up to you. Like, I can quickly talk through, because we've got 6 photos. Well, there's 4 slides, isn't there? I can talk through the first 3 slides really fast and then basically finish.
Okay, let's do that then.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically the last thing I wanted to talk about was, again, under the Foul Truth campaign, is that we've investigated Gressingham duck twice in the last 2 years. So Gressingham duck, if nobody knows who they are, they're the biggest duck producer in the UK. They control over half of the market. So basically, you'll see Gressingham duck products in every major supermarket. Go into Waitrose, and all but one product is a Gressingham duck product, and the other product is an own brand product, and it's quite likely that came from Gressingham duck as well, but it's just in different packaging. So Gressingham duck is everywhere. So yeah, this is the conditions that the birds live in, very similar to the chickens again, just massive indoor sheds. They don't have natural lighting, and they have artificial lighting. And one of the biggest things, obviously, ducks are aquatic birds, and they never have access to open water once until they're killed, like literally until they're killed, because they're stunned in an electrified water bath. That's the first time they ever see a bath of water.
Yeah, the first time they touch water is when they're being killed.
Yes, and that's the first time they ever see sunlight as well. Yeah, if you go to the next photo, you'll see that the floor in the shed is incredibly damp. It's obviously full of feces because these ducks are in there for 6 weeks. They were topping the sheds up ever so slightly with a bit of fresh straw, but I mean, it really doesn't touch the sides when there's up to 12,000 ducks in a single shed. The other thing as well, so the floor gets like this is because they have tiny little drinkers with like lips at the side. So they maybe have a couple of centimeters of water that they can pick up with their beaks. And basically the ducks really try their hardest to pick up as much water as they can and like preen themselves, because ducks naturally are very, very clean birds, and you will always see them preening their feathers. And it also helps them stay waterproof as well, because they draw the oils down to the rest of the feather. And basically they're unable to do this because it's completely unnatural conditions, and the ducks just suffer so much. Yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is the final one about the farm. So this was our first investigation we did at the end of 2019. So it was about 2 years ago now. Yeah, so the other thing as well, so Gressingham Duck are red tractor assured, so it's the biggest assurance scheme in the UK, but as I said earlier, it doesn't really mean anything. The ducks were, I said earlier they didn't have access to natural light. And some of the sheds, the windows did open up at the sides, but the interesting thing is that they kept the artificial lighting on for way longer than they legally should. And the reason that they probably are doing that is because if the ducks, it was the same with the chickens, we found the exact same thing. If they have artificial lighting, it stimulates them to eat more food, and effectively they put weight on faster. So it's more profits for the company, and that's the reason that they do it. These duck sheds were incredibly loud. These ducks can never find a moment of peace. Even as ducklings, they're constantly doing the calls that they would naturally do for their mums. It's very, very upsetting. But yeah, this photo isn't the best photo, but you can see the worker on the right. She's holding the duck, and actually she's about to snap the duck's neck, because again, that's how they get rid of ducks when they're injured or they're lame or they're sick. We actually filmed a few ducks that were left for multiple days in the same positions, just not being picked up by workers or treated or even killed in this way. They were just being left to suffer for days, and basically they'll eventually, be very dehydrated, and then the worker might eventually get to them to kill them.
Did any of these arsehole workers ever discover one of your cameras?
Never so far in this investigation. None of the investigations I've said no.
All these methods you described, like the electrifying bath, were they introduced as welfare at some point? Like gassing the pigs, for example.
Yeah, so with the duck industry, it was very common with chickens as well, but it's kind of being phased out of chickens, is that they use these electrified baths, and it basically puts their head in the bath, it shocks them, and then eventually their heads will be pushed through a tiny gap and have their throat cut by an automated machine. They kind of the reason that they're phasing it out, especially with chickens, is that the workers never have to handle a live animal, because they're gassing, like with chickens now, they're gassing them before the workers get to them. So they're in the crates still, in the transport crates. Whereas at this facility, because these Gressingham slaughter at their own slaughterhouses, but they live shackle the ducks. So then they go into the electrified water bath to be stunned. But, from a welfare perspective, there are obviously a lot of issues with that, because the ducks can simply hold their heads up and they'll never be stunned, and then they'll just be bled out whilst they're conscious.
Ayrton, can I ask you a technical question? You mentioned gassing, right? And so you talked about chickens being gassed, controlled atmospheres, and all this is called. And also the pigs. I've never seen the pig situation except for, one of your films, I think. Now, can you clarify that the gassing is to stun them, not to kill them? Because I see a lot of vegans saying that they're gassed to death. They're gassed to stun them, and then they're cut, right?
Yeah, it honestly depends on the slaughterhouse. So pigs, there'll be pigs are usually gassed to be stunned, and then they'll be hung up and their throat will be slit that way.
Yeah.
So they don't gas pigs to death, typically in the UK. Chickens, they can either gas to stun or gas to kill. It just depends on the actual facility. So they can do
right.
either.
And is that still called controlled? You see, that there's always two phrases: controlled atmosphere stunning and controlled atmosphere killing. So that's what you're talking about. The two.
Yeah, they're the two different things. Yeah, I mean, like if anybody wants to look it up, you can literally just Google, you know, the legislation behind it, look at the FSA information, and yeah, it just explains it. And a good one, well, not a good one, but a website that's useful to look at is the Humane Slaughter Association, so the HSA. Yeah, so they have a lot of information on it, and it just talks about very simple how it all works. I mean, it's very disturbing, obviously, but it's good.
Yeah, in 2007, I did some research to all this when it was first coming in. And I actually did it for Gary Francione, funny enough, and going back to what Wendy was saying. And they were testing in labs at the time, and they were saying that the real problem is that they need to get some turbulence in the gas chambers, otherwise you might get air pockets and stuff. And so they were having to move them around, and they always had to have a human being anyway when they came out to kill them if it hadn't done its trick, as it were.
Yeah, the ones that
in the same way as the necks that are cut with these rotating blades after the head thing. You still got a person after that, making sure, haven't you? So
yeah, something that's interesting actually was so I used to go to a lot of chicken saves, like every week or every 2 weeks for about 3 or 4 years, and speaking to a lot of workers, because I've been there like over 150 times to this one slaughterhouse, and speaking to those workers, like a few of them have mentioned before, like especially with the gassing of the chickens, is that they do have to manually check them afterwards because obviously it doesn't always work. And something that's interesting is that especially if the birds tuck their head under their wing, they're not exposed to the gas as much, because, well, yeah, for obvious reasons. But yeah, so they're the birds that tend to survive. And actually there's quite a lot of information online actually about with the gassing of ducks, is that it's an issue because ducks can hold their breath for a long time. So you have to gas ducks at either a higher concentration or for a longer period of time, or probably both, which is why probably Gressingham just don't gas them. It's why they live shackle.
Are these birds bred for flesh or for their feathers, or for both?
Yeah, it's for the flesh, but obviously they'll be selling the feathers and making money off that as well. Yeah, if you want to go to the next photo, so that was the first investigation we did, which was inside.
This one's a bit of a toughie one, folks. So this is the last one.
Oh yeah, compilation. I keep forgetting. I've got them individual here. Yeah, so I mean, it's quite hard to figure out what's going on in the photos, but basically this is inside Gressingham's own slaughterhouse. So we filmed for simply one day to see what we would find just in a 24-hour period, and we actually narrowed it down to just 12 hours. I think it was from like 8:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night, and we only put out footage from those 12 hours. And during that time, they breached 15 red tractor and government regulations. So this wasn't just like, you know, a one-off, oh, this is really bad, breaching a couple of things, but it's 15 different things that they were doing which they shouldn't have been doing. So the workers, they were very aggressive towards each other. They were literally, like during that day, they had a major dispute, shouting, swearing at each other, all whilst they're live shackling birds. So you'll see on the photo on the left, so that yellow crate, this is where the crates of live ducks come in. The bird that the workers holding is pretty much dead. He then uses a bolt gun through the head and then basically throws them down the chute, which is like the metal section in the bottom right of the photo. And you'll see there as well, there's three feet that have been snapped off the live ducks, which was quite common to see spare feet and legs around in the slaughterhouse. Very disturbing. yeah, so any dead ducks, because they can't then put them through the slaughter line, they basically go down there and, you know, probably end up in dog food or incinerated. The top right photo, at the very bottom of the photo, you can kind of see the line of like white, and that's actually the ducks in the electrified stun bath. So the workers live shackled the ducks, and we saw that workers were aggressively doing it as well. They were pulling the ducks down so hard in the shackles that, like, our vets basically said, you know, they probably got fractures and all sorts and broken bones from that because it was so aggressive. And then, yeah, basically they go down to the electrified stun bath. But something that happened quite a few times during our filming was these big alarms were going off and the slaughter line completely stopped. And it must be common in bird slaughterhouses because it's within the WATOC legislation that if birds are live shackled, they can only stay shackled for up to 2 minutes after the line has stopped. And we filmed them on multiple occasions, but the longest that they left the birds there after the line stopped was 14 minutes, over 14 minutes. So that's 7 times the legal limit that you're allowed to keep birds hung upside down until they're killed. And you know, that's a major law breaking right there. And actually we, you know, as with all our investigations, we pushed that information through to the FSA, which has then gone through to the CPS, because obviously they did their own investigation. They seized Gressingham's own CCTV as well. They've got access to all of our footage. And if people follow Animal Justice Project, you will have seen that we're currently trying to push a petition because the CPS about 2.5 months ago now, maybe 3 months, although they were following up the prosecution with the FSA, the CPS, who's the Crown Prosecution Service, who prosecutes on behalf of the UK government, they decided it was not in the public's interest to carry forward a prosecution. I don't know what they mean that, you know, that's in the public's interest, because clearly upholding the law, it should be within the public's interest, especially when it comes to animals. And we're basically trying to appeal that decision. The FSA, bearing in mind how terrible I said they were before, were kind of helping us to appeal it, but eventually they've pulled out as well, and they're not even going to be following this up either. So this is why we've launched our petition, and we've actually got about 63,000 signatures on this petition. And every single time somebody signs, an email gets sent to the CPS and to the FSA. So that's like over 120,000 emails that our supporters have now sent out.
What's the petition for?
We're urging the CPS to continue with the prosecution. We want them to prosecute Gressingham Foods.
But aren't we back into that problem that, you know, Nella first raised about prosecution? You just mentioned, for example, that there was 15 breaches of welfare law, and then you've got the other one with regard to the amount of minutes that the ducks work. Now, if you make a big fuss about that, aren't they just going to think that's what you're wanting them to sort out?
Yeah, so all of the welfare side of things, so all of those original breaches, basically, you know, they'd have gone in, Gressingham put out a statement both times, simply saying that they retrain staff, and they probably fire 1 or 2 members of staff who are, you know, the bad apples. But the reason that we're wanting to pursue this is because it's clear law breaking, and it's not a welfare law. It's the slaughter legislation. It's nothing to do with the welfare from the Red Tractor standards or the UK standards. It's pretty much, you know, the one key finding that was not welfare based. It's just clear law breaking, which is why we wanted to pursue that one.
I'm struggling to see the difference between the two, to be honest.
I mean, so like the way that they handle the birds, for example, I mean, that's very like welfare based. You know, they're never going to be prosecuted for that. But keeping those live birds, I see what you mean. You can see it as a welfare perspective, but keeping those live birds hung upside down, shackled, that is what is clearly breaking the law. It's not going against any of the Red Tractor standards or any other welfare for farmed animal standards, because there's quite a few different standards in the UK. Basically, none of them cover the live shackling and the time. It's the actual UK legislation that covers that one.
So do you present it as these are the atrocities that happen routinely, whether any welfare law is broken or not? That's irrelevant from an animal rights point of view. That's how you must have to put it, right?
Yeah, so they get all of our findings, so they'll see everything that we put out in the investigation. So it does include, you know, the terrible handling, the probably breaking of their bones and all sorts. But our key focus is, especially when working with the FSA, will be the law breaking. Because if we're ever going to get anything against this company, this will be it.
I'm just wondering why it's not framed in the sense that these are rights violations.
They're what, rights violations?
Yeah.
All of them, or just the live chat?
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, from an animal rights point of view, the use of them is a rights violation. And so you'll be
definitely
showing different aspects of use, and all of it amounts to a rights violation.
Yeah, completely. I agree. I think when I'm saying welfare standards, I'm literally talking about like red tractor standards rather than, you know, the actual welfare of the birds. Because again, with this investigation and with any of the foul truth investigations, we are asking for them. You know, obviously we want Gressingham to be prosecuted, and actually it's a really key time as well for Gressingham at the minute because, you know, in the last years we've recently put out some information that the duck industry declined by 20%. So the entire industry, bearing in mind Gressingham control over half of it, they're going to be losing like a lot of money compared to previous years. Plus, last Christmas time, Gressingham got hit bad with bird flu, and they had to kill multiple of their breeding stocks. I say breeding stocks because these are like industry terms that we use. You know, they had to kill, you know, thousands and thousands of their breeding birds. So we really want to push forward for this prosecution because it is, we're obviously pushing the animal rights perspective, but if they're ever going to be prosecuted, this will be the one key thing that they're going to be done for, simply because the FSA doesn't care about the welfare side of things, whereas this is a very clear break-in of UK law, whereas welfare goes against welfare regulations.
What if
I'm explaining myself well. I feel like I'm not.
What will happen if they are prosecuted? What would be the kind of outcome of that, do you think?
I mean, it's not going to close them down. We're well aware of that. But, you know, if they can have, you know, massive fines, I mean, that would be an ideal outcome because this company is under so much pressure with the decline of the duck industry, especially because of, you know, lack of imports and exports over the last year as well. This would just be like another added thing against the duck industry as a whole because they control so much of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I also guess that if they are prosecuted, you can use this fact in a campaign. I mean, if the state prosecutes someone who is accredited by a state organization, then it's pretty obvious to the consumer that something is wrong.
Exactly. And again, it shows, going back to what I was talking about with Scammed, it shows that the system doesn't work and it's built to fail animals again. Because again, this slaughterhouse had its own CCTV, which is mandatory inside this particular slaughterhouse. You know, the workers, these are all trained operatives. That's what the company likes to call them. And obviously it's red tractor. So it shows that all of these assurance schemes and all of the government bodies and the mandatory CCTV, and there would have been a vet on site. It just, again, shows that it doesn't work. So it actually backs up the point that the system is built to fail the animals. Hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, I suppose that's the point, isn't it? We've got to keep reinforcing that, okay, we're not asking for you to improve this. We're not asking for you to regulate this better. What we're saying, it's never going to work and it just doesn't work and it's morally wrong. And keep pushing that point.
Yeah, I mean, like, something important to point out is that when I'm talking through these investigations, obviously I'm pointing out the different breaches of laws and welfare and stuff. They're not the key focuses of what we tend to put out. Obviously, we do talk about them because it backs up our case for animal rights completely. but we will always, alongside it, we always push the abolitionist message of people going vegan, stop supporting these industries, and to bring an end to the whole system and replace it completely.
Yeah, no, that's important. And actually, because I think that that conversation's continued in the chat a little bit, and I'm not sure who said what, but I think it might be Race again saying how I can't find it now. There's been so much. There's been some really interesting
comments. There is
comments.
a lot of comments.
It's hard to keep up with all of them, but I think it's basically about saying how Race was saying that they advocate for abolition, but they wouldn't stand in the way of welfare. But I don't think anyone is saying that. I don't think anyone here would say, like Roger was saying earlier, it's not all or nothing. Is like, look, give me abolition or like do nothing. It's not that. But there are so many people in this movement. Like you've got even Compassion in World Farming and people like that. They're not abolitionists. They are quite happy to kind of advocate for better conditions. And I've even stood alongside them at events for, you know, live export, and they will talk about on the hook, not on the hoof, because they you know, we want our animals killed on British soil, not shipped abroad, you know, that kind of thing. So there are so many people and these organizations who are advocating for better conditions or to stop live export and things like this, that actually there are a lot of people advocating for welfare in these industries. And
the whole of the general public is,
and the whole of the general public advocating for welfare. So I think the abolitionist faction of the movement is so small that we need, if abolitionists spout welfare, then we're lost, because we have to keep putting that abolitionist message out there, because everyone else is putting out welfare. So who's going to put out abolition if the abolitionists don't?
Exactly. I mean, we always put the messaging across that we want to end all of animal agriculture. We don't just want to end, you know, intensive farms, factory farms. We want to end it all, and this is why we try to choose, you know, with our investigations, we try to choose key examples, which is why we've gone against RSPCA short chickens, because that was the first time they've ever been investigated. This is the first time the UK duck industry has ever been in-depth investigated before. And obviously last week, you know, all the different calf industries. So these industries have not been investigated enough for them to be like a common thought in the public's mind, which is why with the asks, we always do need that abolitionist ask, because, you know, there's not been many duck investigations in the UK ever. So we need to go in there with 100% messaging. Hopefully that does.
So if someone wants to follow the campaigns or sign the petitions or contribute in any way, where they can find you?
Yeah, so if you follow Animal Justice Project on social media, so we're on like all platforms of social media. You can go to our website as well, animaljusticeproject.com. All of our bird work is on thefoultruth.org. All of these are linked from the main website, which are linked off our social media. So simply, if you follow us on social media, you'll find everything there. If there's people that want to sign our petition, please do. You don't have to be in the UK to sign it. We've got about 63,000 signatures so far. So, and we've got loads of little actions you could do on the website as well for loads of different campaigns. We're always releasing new actions, new investigations, new campaigns. So come follow us and show support. We are only a very small group. I know we've spoken about quite a lot today, but we are quite a small group relatively in the UK. But
but you've run so many campaigns.
So much. Yeah, you're doing so much.
Yeah.
Is there any last words to be said about these pictures, or do I remove them now? Or
feel free to remove. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I think I'm just used to them.
I know that's the point, isn't it? I mean, you were saying to us before last week's show, actually, Ayrton, that actually you spend so much time as campaigns manager looking through this footage and looking at these pictures that you have to, in a way, desensitize yourself to them, don't you? Because it's just part of now the work that you have to do, and you have to get through it in order to do the work you do. And it's just so difficult. I found it hard just to sit there and look at those just tonight, and I think Nella was probably the same, and I'm not sure, if other people here and Roger as well, but it must be quite challenging to do that.
Yeah, it can be very tough. Especially what I find the most tough is when we investigate an industry that's never really been looked into before. Simply because, so like if you're scrolling through social media, you might see pig farming a few times and see how horrific it is. So I think in general, activists kind of see, the commonly investigated industries, and they're used to it. Like I certainly am. I'm used to, see what pig farming looks like, chicken farming. But like earlier this year, we did, like with the calf slaughter. I mentioned that that's the first time that that's ever been filmed in the UK. So I've only ever seen calf slaughter footage from a European country, and it was a very short footage. But then looking at hours and hours of tiny innocent calves being killed, obviously it's horrendous. But yeah, you do have to desensitize yourself to it a little bit, and it does happen over time, which is not the best thing to probably say. I still obviously feel for the animals, but I do try and just keep in the back of my mind that we, we'll hopefully get it into national press. We'll be able to convince more people to stop supporting it. And if we hadn't filmed it and put it out there and worked, weeks and weeks on this and months on these investigations, it would have all happened anyway. And those animals would have died without anybody knowing apart from those workers. So, it is very tough, but... Yeah,
and I really admire people who sit through the footage and go into the places and do the investigations, and like Joanne MacArthur with her We Animals projects and all the photographs that she does and things. I know, and I really admire these people and just wonder, how they do it. But I really, I'm glad people are out there doing this kind of exposure work and shining a light on the horrors that are going on. So thank you, and thanks to...
Yeah, well, we did say last time, though, didn't we, Wendy, that there's an ironic sense that if you're actually producing the material and working on it, that might actually be easier than just passively consuming it. So there's that kind of weird kind of dynamic as well.
Here's Molly.
Molly.
Say hello.
Hello.
Just getting shy, look.
Oh, Brian, you've been...
Oh, Brian, you've been upstage there, mate.
Yeah, where's Brian?
Upstage, Brian. You better come over.
Molly wants me to stop working now because I've been on this PC.
He's like, what?
Brian's all that hat now, isn't he? Yeah.
Oh, Brian, you miss Molly. It's like, just get me my dinner, human.
Right, well, it's thank you for your 2 weeks.
Thank you so much for having me. Sorry I've gone over so much every time.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
As Michael said, it was horrifying but informative. I think
it was very informative.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
I mean, it's horrible stuff to talk about, but it needs doing, I guess, doesn't it? But yeah, if you want to show support, go follow Animal Justice Project. And Molly and Brian, that sounds like a cool band.
The Molly and Brian show,
definitely.
She'll have to be a regular.
All the people in the chat are obviously very tired now. We're all getting a bit sad.
I know. Oh look, here she is.
No, they're perfect. Oh, look at Molly's little face. Can I just ask how Tommy is as well, Ayrton?
Oh, he's doing really well.
Is he?
Yeah, because obviously he's got his head tilt, and he'll probably have his head tilt forever. Oh, Tommy is a rabbit, by the way, everybody. Yeah, he'll probably have his head tilt, but it is lessening slightly, and he can walk so much easier now. When he first came out of his operation a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, he could barely lie down because of how severe the head tilt was. Because of how bad it was, he was rolling over straight away. But now, yesterday, he actually lay down like a normal rabbit for the first time. So it's just like having these little proud...
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so pleased. And is Juno doing well as well?
Yeah, I seen she's been for her post-op check today because obviously she had to have a second surgery on her leg. But yeah, all is good. all is going really
So-
well with them. So
Just in case anyone missed that, Juno and Tommy were rescued and surrendered from a rabbit protest farm, wasn't it? Up in
yeah,
what it was now, Nottinghamshire, wasn't it?
Nottinghamshire. Yeah, right near where I am. Yeah, we managed to rescue 2 and they're doing really well. And yeah, he like comes out in the living room every night because it's in like a massive pen in my dining room where like the rest of the animals are. But yeah, he comes out each evening, just chills with us. The cats are like there and he chills, and he's the same size as the cats. Actually, he's bigger than one of them. He's so big.
Are they all getting on okay?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, my cats are very used to various animals coming and going because we've fostered rabbits many times in the past and fostered guinea pigs, and we've got our own animals, rescued animals. So they're kind of used to animals coming and going. So they just kind of take it at their stride. Yeah.
I don't think Brian would take it in his stride. Having a rabbit person here. What do you reckon, Brian?
See, the thing is, Tommy, because of his head tilt, he can't jump on the furniture, so he stays on the floor. Like when he's running around, he can only basically be on floor level. So if the cats are just not impressed, they just sit on the sofa. So it works well. Oh, big hugs. Yeah, I'll give him a hug when I get him out in a minute. I've got to go do his supper. He gets fed about 10 times throughout the day.
Right, folks, should we bring this loving to a close now, or what?
Well, I think it was good to finish on a positive, though, wasn't it? After all that.
So, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much again. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
No, thank you, Ayrton.
Thank you, everyone, for the lovely comments as well, like this week and last week. It's been really, really nice. Yeah,
thanks to everyone in the chat. It was such a great discussion in there today, and it's just so lovely to see all these regular names coming up. It's like makes you feel like this.
Yeah, you've got a right little like family show.
Oh no, they're brilliant.
Yes,
They're
it feels like that.
It's great.
Yeah,
You say family
the
show.
family, vegan family.
Yeah, like you've got your little family community in the comments.
We do.
Yeah, our viewers are the bestest.
Right, folks, this is the slowest goodbye ever, but
It's like the
I told you, you
Waltons,
just
isn't
need
it?
to kick me
Good
off.
night.
Just kick me out.
yeah.
Good night, Roger. Good night, Nella. Good night, Nella. Good night, Ayrton Cooper.
And that's a good accent, though, Wendy. That's good. That I like that.
Oh, thanks.
Right, I'm going to press the button. So goodbye, everyone.
Okay. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care, everyone.